Item number 1, Resolution 12-23 relating to important agricultural lands, urging the city's agricultural liaison to expedite the identifying and mapping of important agricultural lands and ensure that the city works to preserve the availability of agricultural lands for farming.
I'd like to address specifically the problems of Ho'opili, the Purple Spot, and Coal Ridge. Ordinarily, the city would not consider any kind of, give Ho'opili and Coal Ridge any kind of consideration whatsoever. And the reason is because they are within the urban growth boundary, and they are currently designated by the city as for urban development. At the Land Use Commission, you know I'm an intervener at the Land Use Commission on the matter of Ho'opili, right? At the Land Use Commission, Kathy Sokugawa came, and I asked her, have you given any consideration to the Ho'opili as important agricultural lands? And she said no. And I pushed her and asked, why did you not even consider Ho'opili for important agricultural lands? And she said specifically because the city plans that area for development. So they're not considering this, and the way this bill will go through is going to not consider those lands. Now, I need to tell you that the state, by the latest USD reports, the USDA, the state is importing 90% to 92% of all the food we eat. We used to think it was 80 to 85, but the USDA has come out and said now it's 90 to 92%. I want you to realize, too, that that land at Ho'opili and Coal Ridge together produce 40% of our fresh vegetables that are locally grown. 40%. Now, you take those lands away, and we're going to have 40% less fresh vegetables from this island. May I please continue?
Yes.
Okay. The other thing that you need to realize is how precious that land is. In Waimanalo, where you're from, Chairman, Dr. James Brubaker, a famous old man at the University of Hawaii, who's now Professor Emeritus, who's going to be testifying for us, years ago did a study in Waimanalo and found that contrary to the rest of the world where you only get one crop of corn a year because you have winters, in Waimanalo they get two. But Waimanalo has a lot of rain. So he went up to the central area of Oahu and he tested corn there and how many crops you could get a year. And he could get 3 up there because it has less rain. But as you know, central Oahu has a lot of cloud cover, and what it takes for plants to grow is not water, but sunshine. And so he went down to the Ewa Plains, specifically to the area that we're talking about, Ho'opili, and he raised corn there, and he found he could get 4 crops a year. Now, you can't get 4 crops a year anywhere else on this island. And that is the highest producing, that's the highest producing land that we have on the island. For us not to consider that as important agricultural lands, when it, along with Coal Ridge, produce 40% of our presently, the 40% of all of the fresh fruits and vegetables that we have, just simply makes no sense.
Dr. Dudley, could you please begin to summarize?
I will. Okay. I wanted to emphasize that the Important Agricultural Lands Bill does say that each county shall identify and map potential important agricultural lands except lands that have been designated for urban use by the city and county. We need a rider on this thing. You know, in the first place, we need to realize there is no deadline for you guys to move, okay? There is a day before which you cannot start, but there is no deadline at which you have to end, okay? You also have to realize that this will influence the Land Use Commission. I mean, why are we considering this right now? The Land Use Commission is considering Ho'opili, and it is considering Coal Ridge. If all of a sudden the City Council decides, oh, these lands are not important agricultural lands, sure, that's going to affect the Land Use Commission. Yes. Why is all this happening now? It's a good question. I think we need to look into that. What do I see as things that you ought to be doing? First of all, defer the bill. Let the Land Use Commission make their decisions, and then work on it after that. If you decide that you're not going to defer the bill until then, at least put something into the bill saying that the liaison and DPP must study the lands for Ho'opi, Koa Ridge, and the Purple Spot, and make sure that you've got those studies before you make any decision on IAL, because I'll tell you, things are going very well for our side at the Land Use Commission.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And if it's really true that we can only identify important ag lands other than those in the urban growth boundaries, so meaning we can identify those except those in the urban growth. So if Councilmember Berg is asking to go beyond the parameters, so can we do that?
It's possible, but it's a balancing act that DPP will use to identify the land. So they could, but I think that we made this, DPP testified at the Land Use Commission that it'd be likely that we wouldn't identify IAL within the urban growth boundary, such as Ho'opili, because, you know, we're considering our own processes of the general plan and the EVA development plan, and how those plans came about, and how they are continuously updated with public input. And that's where we're going to have growth within those boundaries in order to save ag lands and other lands outside of those boundaries.
Okay.
Councilmember Kobayashi.
Can I move to amend the resolution just to say that, asking that as they're doing the mapping, whoever they contract with, at least recognize productivity, because the whole basis of this resolution is not, you know, any kind of stuff that is before the LUC, but mainly to push for sustainability for our, not just our county, but our state. So can we amend this to say, to ask that as they're doing their mapping, that they recognize productivity? I think they also have to recognize availability of water. So if we have places where we have A lands and water, and there's productivity, then that should be recognized as they're doing their mapping.
As you're the chief introducer of the resolution, Councilmember Kobayashi, if you'd like to propose that amendment.
Yes.
I'm fine with that.
Okay.
Vice Chair, you okay with that?
I don't have any problem.
Okay. We'll go ahead and amend the resolution then accordingly. Councilmember Berg, any statement?
Thank you. And I think it's important to hear that when we knowingly know we can get 4 crops out of productive ag lands, and to say that, to sacrifice that, so somewhere else where you can get 2 crops a year. Thank you for your amendment.
Councilmember Kobayashi.
Can I just add that, you know, I'm sorry this became such a like political and involving the 2 cases before LUC, because this was at the request of a group of farmers, and some of them from the neighbor islands, who are concerned about sustainability and concerned about food production, and that was the whole basis of this resolution. Thank you.
Councilmember Kobayashi, could you just please state your amendment again, if you would?
The amendment to, as they're doing their mapping, that they consider not just the availability of water and the other criteria, but that they recognize the productivity of lands that are classified as A lands as they're doing their mapping. That they recognize the A lands and the productivity of those lands.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If it's Class A, identified Class A ag land, but it's in the urban growth boundary, we're not going to look at it. Because
Right.
we've heard this discussion that they're going to omit urban growth boundary territory.
So if they would recognize the lands that are A
Regardless.
lands with productivity that are in the urban growth boundary, that at least they be recognized.
So it's regardless of any urban growth boundary.
Right. If they're A lands and have productivity.
Thank you for that clarity.
The Constitution refers to prime agricultural lands, which includes both A and B. So
Okay.
if you just say A, that might
So prime rather than A and B.
Resolution 12-23, CD1 be reported out for adoption.